So I'm excited today to have a conversation with Mr. Terrence Walton from the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. Husband, father, I mean, all around great guy.
Okay.
And I consider him a mentor and friend. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. I'm grateful that you took a few minutes to chat with me today.
My pleasure. Glad to do it.
So talk to me about NADCP and your role here. How did you get here?
Well, the National Association of Drug Court Professionals is a national nonprofit. We represent and lead the drug treatment court field. Now, drug treatment courts are courts, but they're courts specifically for people who are living with addiction and mental health issues who are a part of the system because of those issues. And drug courts work with doctors and treatment providers and judges and lawyers to create programs and opportunities for those men and women to receive effective treatment instead of incarceration. So it's a big deal. It's been around this is the 30th anniversary of the drug court field. The first drug court was opened in 1989, and the 25th anniversary of NADCP. I've been a part of it in this role as Chief Operating Officer for about 5 years, and many years before that as a consultant. And how I got here, that's more time than we have. Really, it's this next step in Pierre, a journey that began for me about 30 years ago when I took my first job as a tech on a treatment center, in the treatment center for kids. My first job in the field, and had lots of other opportunities in between there, and currently here really helping to lead this movement, both in the U.S. and nationally.
So let's go back. When
All right.
you were in high school, when you were in college,
Yeah.
did you see yourself? Did you even know what drug court was? And did you see yourself working in this capacity?
I did know what drug court was. I understood addiction.
Okay.
Understood it from people in my family. I have an uncle who was my favorite uncle, my mother's brother, who lived with alcoholism for most of his life until the end when he got into recovery. And I had, some other interest in awareness of it, but no, I was going to be a minister. From the time I was a little kid, I always knew I wanted to preach the word. I never wanted to do anything else. I went to a school you've heard of, Oakwood College, for a little time, and at that college decided I don't want to be a pastor. That's not what I want to do with my life. I'm not even sure why I decided that. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is no joke. That's what I always wanted to do. And I had a lot of support at a mentor who was a pastor there who worked with the conference to give me a scholarship as a freshman, which didn't happen, So there was a lot of pressure for me to pursue this that I always wanted. And while there, I decided not. I now know God had a different path for me, a different kind of ministry. And so, no, it's not what I thought I'd be doing. But I did know that I'd be doing something that was about helping people, that was about leading, that involved teaching and speaking. I then didn't know, though, what the issue was. I didn't know what I cared most about. I discovered that almost by mistake, at least on the surface.
Talk to me about the importance of being patient, because now you're in the C-suite, and I want you to demystify the C-suite for us. But you've been on this professional journey, and now you sit in a leadership role for a major association.
Yeah.
But you did groundwork and grunt work and jobs that you didn't like, and you didn't. Today's culture, we want to skip a lot of steps, and we want to go straight to the corner office. What's the value in this part of the journey?
Well, that's a really, really good question, and I'm glad you asked it, because it is I mentor some emerging leaders and some current leaders who are trying to go to the next level, and we spent some time talking about that, what that looks like. So the first thing for me, I'll just talk about my experience, was even when I was doing work that had nothing to do with the path I thought I would be on, I really tried to give it my best. If it was something I had to learn, I tried to learn it. And in the process, I tried to be a part of good organizations. I watched what effective leaders did. And mostly, especially as I began to say, okay, I want to make addiction my field, I made a concerted effort to to build my expertise, to become exceptionally competent in the subject matter, and to see where that led. So it began, I did, I was a tech on a treatment center, which was basically my full job was to, I had to collect urines for urine testing. I had to keep the kids from, killing each other, and it was the lowest level there you could get. But it was at that level that I realized, hey, this is what I want to be doing. This is what matters to me. It happened to be a really well-run treatment center, so I got to see how it looks when you have a treatment center where people have money and they can get the best of care. And so I did that job for a while. I did, eventually got certified, eventually got a degree, and began doing direct service counseling, as a one-on-one counselor, group counselor. And I didn't do that for a long time. I did it for about 6 or 7 years. And I'm so glad I did. It gave me perspective, Pierre, that I would never have had otherwise, that helped me even today as I work with people who are working with people who are doing that now. And that's been important. But because, especially in my field, I was really effective as a counselor, really effective at helping people, we almost always end up getting promoted to supervisors. That just happens, whether you want to or not, we almost end up in that position. And it's really there, my first supervisor position, that I had a decision to make. I decided, okay, is this what I like? Is this what I want to do? And how do I do it more effectively? And I spent a long time in supervisor positions, then eventually middle management, then went to the federal government and worked there for 15 years in a senior position there, and then made the tough decision to leave that good, secure federal job for what I'm doing here. But it was a journey. But I can say I believe, honestly, that I worked just as hard at my first position as this one, and almost as many hours sometimes. It's just how I, it's what I did. And everything I learned in those earlier positions, if I had moved too soon, if I had advanced too quickly, and a couple of times I came close to doing that. If I advanced too quickly, I would have made some mistakes that I was able to avoid by giving it more time. So, yeah, it's about patience, but it's also about knowing, when to go to the next level. So, one more thing. Most people don't know this, but while I was an excellent student in high school and college, I actually spent 10 years getting my undergrad. And once I left Oakwood and was no longer going to study theology, I didn't know what I was going to study. So I took different courses. I got a full-time job. I was a business major for a minute. I moved to communications. Then I moved to something else before I ended up in psychology. And all the time I was working. But that was giving me, that was 10 years of figuring out what I wanted to do and being sure that I was prepared to do so. And that was really valuable time. So that by the time I, had reached where I needed to, academically, and got my master's right away after that, I was positioned to be in leadership positions. But it was a journey, and it required me to do the groundwork. It required me to know when it was time to move. What most people don't know is that what most propelled me to finish my degree is because the first job I had, where I was a tech, the lowest level position there, lowest level position, I was very young, just barely out of high school. And when the director left, several people asked me credibly, "Oh, are you planning to apply for his job?" That was a ridiculous question to me. I didn't have a degree. I had almost no experience. They saw something in me that I really didn't even see in myself. They were serious. And I thought, well, no, I'm not going to do that. It wasn't time for that. But it made me think, well, dude, wow, what would you need to do? Because this is what you want to do. Yeah. You'd love to run something like this. What do you need to do so that the next time that door opens, or a time that opens, you can walk through it? And that got me serious about what I wanted to do. I spent the next 2 years finishing off that first degree, went right to graduate school, But it was that moment. It was people around me, colleagues, superiors to me, seeing something in me that I really didn't see in myself yet, that propelled me to begin to move forward. So yes, it's about patience, but it's also about, while you're being patient, be preparing, and have yourself where that when that opportunity opens, you can at least put your hat in the ring.
We've both been around people who their community or support group has looked at them and said, I see something in you, but for whatever reason, they didn't lean in.
Yeah.
What are the factors that contribute to a person leaning into when someone says, I see something? And what are the factors that cause people to, no matter what people say in reference to their gifts and talents, to not take hold of it and run with it?
I don't know the answer to that fully. I think it's a combination of things. I think sometimes we're hearing things from people that really confirm what on some level we've always known. I've always known, like, I had a calling.
Yeah.
And again, when I went through my period where I was no longer sure which direction that calling was, it was still there. But I got involved in life and working and making money, and I was single then and trying to not to be and all of that, and so I'd forgotten, that there were some things that were really important I was supposed to do, and I believe that God used those people. That's how I view it. Used those people to remind me. It really was a ridiculous question. There was no way I could have gotten or should have applied for that, but that serious inquiry reminded me of what I'd already known. I'd spent much of my life as a young kid studying presidents and preachers, people in leadership, and in some ways, consciously and otherwise, I guess, sort of modeling myself after them. And so they saw some of that. So sometimes it's confirmation of what you already know. But it also required me to accept both my strengths as well as my weaknesses. What I said to you earlier is my demons. To understand that they are there, and to be willing to do the work on those, because that was getting in the way. It can make us feel not worthy, not good enough, and certainly afraid. It can make us feel that, these people don't know everything. They don't know all of me. And if they knew all of me, they wouldn't be even suggesting that. And that can really, I think there are people right now who are listening to this and watching this, well, that's where they are. They know all of them, and that stops them from moving forward. And so for me, and it's an ongoing journey, but for me to accept sort of what God has for me, to accept the leadership positions that I always find myself in, it was both recognizing my own weaknesses, the things I need to be careful of, being willing to deal with them, but also recognize that all of us, are leading while wounded. We're all working wounded, and that we just want to be sure we are doing the best we can most days. So, yeah, I think sometimes we lean in, we can accept that because it confirms what we already know, or what was revealed to us much earlier. When it doesn't happen, even if we know we could do it, it's that other stuff that that we don't see in other people, we see in ourselves, and we feel unworthy or afraid that it either won't go well or it will go well, and we won't be able to handle it at the top.
Well, you mentioned leading while wounded, and many times the wounds that we get throughout our experiences lead to us being fearful, lead to us being scared. Sure. And this is the premise behind my new book, Leading While Scared, How to Find the Courage to Keep Going, which in this special edition that we're doing of the book, you wrote the foreword for, and I'm very appreciative for that. Can you talk to us maybe about a time in your professional experience, maybe in the distant past or recent past, where you recognized that you had to do it afraid, that even though some things happened to you in the past, you still had to find the courage just to keep going?
Well, I'll give the recent past. There's a whole list. That's the truth. There's a whole list. I believe that, faith and fear can coexist. That real faith is moving forward even when you're afraid. So that's real courage to me and real faith. So I know a lot there. I can give lots of examples, but a very recent one. I mentioned that I was with the federal government for 15 years. I was in a senior position there. I was on the path for an SES, an executive level position there, and knew the job well, knew the organization well, was well regarded there. And because I was officially law enforcement and had been there for 15 years, if I'd hung on for just a few more years, I could have retired as a relatively young man with a full federal pension and then go and do something else. And that was it's what my colleagues did. It's what my colleagues, as others who were at my position, they all did that. They all decided, that's a reasonable decision. Hang on so you can retire and then get a different job with the security of a nice federal pension. And it occurred to me about 2 years before I left that it was time to go. I was impressed that I didn't come here to stay here. I didn't come to this agency, to the federal government, to retire from the federal government. I came for a purpose, and that purpose was fulfilled. And that there was something else I had that wasn't necessarily bigger, but broader, that had a broader impact nationally and internationally. And so the thought of that was exciting to me, but at that same time, I also now had a family. I got married in my 30s and had my first kid right around that time. And right around the time I was making this decision. And so there are lots of reasons to stay put. Lots of reasons to, now it wasn't just me. It wasn't just me and my wife, because we would kind of ride or die. She would go wherever I go, but now I also had a little girl. And I said, if I just hang around here, it makes sense. If I just hang around for a few more years, go ahead and retire from here, then I can go and speak or do whatever I want to do. I became increasingly impressed. The more time I spent in prayer, the more time I spent in meditation, the more time I spent pondering, it was clear it was time to go. And I was afraid. There's just no question about that. And I was afraid that even though I knew this organization, I didn't know from the inside. And there is a stability in federal work that seemed, and I was director of treatment, doing the work in my field, but I knew it was time to go. And I faced that fear. I took the big step and did so. And it could have turned out lots of ways. I'll land on my feet regardless. But sometimes, you don't land on your feet initially, you have to struggle back up. But it ended up being the best professional decision I have ever made. I loved what I was doing. Have close relationships right now. Some of the people I talk about mentoring are people from that life who are still there. But clearly, only once I had made the leap, that I realized, oh, wow, it was time for this. Not only was I energized in a different way, not only did I have this flood of ideas of new ways I could take what we were doing in D.C. and expand that nationally, internationally. It was all of that. But it also positioned me to see and do and experience things that could have never happened where I was. But that was, of all my career decisions, of all my professional decisions, the one that I was most afraid of. And if not for my sort of belief that this was something that God wanted me to do, I don't know that I could have done it. I don't know that I could have, because it was full of uncertainty, and at least on paper, if I laid it out, it made sense to stay where I was, at least for a few more years.
Yeah. Now you're here in ADCP. Can you demystify what it means to be a C-suite executive? Because there's a lot of aspiration. Business school, undergrad, or growing up, I want to be a CEO. Yeah. I want to be a COO. I want to sit in the boardroom, the conference room. Yeah. And we have this glamorous picture of leadership at this level. What's the reality of leadership at this level?
Well, the reality is, if you are a leader, if you aspire to leadership, and if that's something which, is part of you, there are a lot of parts about that which are wonderful. That no matter how stressful your environment is, in leadership, you have more ability to do something about that. And so with all the stress that I face, my stress is a little different than the stress I faced when I was in a position that didn't have much influence. You know, I couldn't do much about it. So that part is great. That part fits well with my personality, with my job satisfaction. But what probably most surprised me is the amount of time and energy I need to invest in everybody else. That I actually had a lot more time to work on improving myself, becoming more competent, becoming a better leader, when I wasn't at this level. At this level, it is so clear that no matter how good I am, no matter how gifted I am, I cannot make this work by myself. If I'm not shaping leaders around me, if I'm not bringing the best and the brightest, if I'm not empowering them and creating a work environment or helping to create a work environment that actually fosters people being at their best, then I'm not going to be successful. The organization is not going to be successful. We don't move this organization and this field forward. That wasn't a big eye opener for me because listen, most of the time, yeah, I was always part of a team, but I was a one-man show. You know, I thought no one could do it as good as me, and I didn't delegate much, and I put a whole lot of time in putting my mark on everything. And at this level, especially for an organization which is as broad as this one is, and we're very successful, and we have we have a really solid brand all over the nation and the world, and it takes a lot to keep that going. I had to invest a lot more in the people around me. I've always worked hard, but never harder than now. I've always worked long hours, but never longer than now, never. And that isn't what I envisioned, you know, when I was a counselor and a drug tech, when I was a supervisor. You know, there is more flexibility. That's great. But the flexibility usually means I'm here a lot longer. And I'm usually the first one here and often the last one to leave. It's the demands of the work. It's both the people who work here, the work itself. I'm the chief operating officer. So while, you know, yes, I need to be concerned about vision and the big picture, that's really the CEO's job. I've got to know what that vision is and make it happen at this level. And that requires an investment that I had to learn, and I didn't expect it. So it's working for me, but the people who I work with one-on-one, who want to be at this level, I really urge them to think about that and be sure they know what that means. And if you have the right skill set, and it's for something you really care about, I highly recommend it. But it's not the easy road. You know, you often have to make decisions that where there are no real good options. And sometimes, you know, especially in my role in most organizations, the COO, you know, if things aren't going well, if people need to be let go, that falls on my lap. And the decisions that have to be made operationally and otherwise that you make at this level. So again, listen, I'm not discouraging anybody, but I do think it is service, and there are burdens associated with it. Sometimes are counterbalanced by flexibility and the ability to influence what happens, but it does need to be something that you really want to do.
So I'm gonna try to throw you a curve.
All right.
This is my last question for you. Go back to tech Terrence.
Yes.
At that stage of your life.
Sure.
And you're not necessarily speaking to you, but you're speaking to someone who they're like at the lowest. It's aspiration, there's gifts there they've identified, but they're trying to figure out, you know, what's next.
Yeah.
And this person goes into a Chinese restaurant.
Oh, wow. This is a curve.
Yeah, curve. Dinner is over.
All right.
And they bring the fortune cookies.
Yeah.
They open up the fortune cookie. What does it need to say to them? What's the message they need to hear in that moment to find the courage to keep going?
It's going to have to be kind of a long fortune cookie.
A little string,
All right.
a couple of them.
A couple strings, all right. Because this reminds me a little bit not the same, but a little bit. And I don't want to be a spoiler for your book, but toward the end of your book, in fact, the end of your book, you put something out there about what your picture of courage is like. And if this is a spoiler, just edit this out. What would a picture of courage look like? If you drew it, what would it look like? So it's kind of the same question to me. Because I thought about that, and I don't think in pictures, I think in words. But I saw a picture of a plaque or a sign that has been in almost every workplace I've been in, because I've always worked in the recovery environment, addiction recovery. And it's a sign that has the words, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so that fortune cookie should say, you know, the courage to change the things I can. Wow. And for me, it always starts inside. Man.
That's good.
It always starts inside. And then in my environment, in my workplace, in my own practice, and depend on my influence at every level I am, what can I change that needs to change? What is, and how do I know the difference? That's what I'd want, you know, my fortune to have said back then, and that's what I hope for every emerging leader out there. And it does start though inside, with the courage to change, the courage to confront, the courage to accept and challenge sometimes who I am and what's inside of me. Because to the extent that I've been able to do that, in some ways I wish I had your book when I was a lot younger, but to the extent that I've been able to do that in my life, it has demonstrably impacted my success, my effectiveness in leading people and organizations.
My guest on this episode of the Leading While Green podcast has been Terrence Walton. We could go for hours.
We could.
I know we can, but I thank you for taking the time. And I know I'm better for this exchange, and I know the audience will be better for it as well.
My pleasure.